Hey, it's Steve Lindsley. Welcome to part 2 of my video on my Hannah's Hope Chest build. Hopefully you enjoyed part 1. In this video I'm going to show you how I make the base, the lid, the molding, put some hinges and finish on this piece. So it turned out pretty nice, I think. It's been delivered and hopefully Hannah's enjoying it. So I'm sure it'll give her many years of good service. So sit back, relax, and I'll show you how I finished up this project. With the main part of the chest done, it's time to start working on the base. So here's one of the base pieces. I'm going to miter. It's a lot easier to miter these because they're more normal size rather than those big panels I had to miter. So I just used a auxiliary fence on the miter gauge and set the saw for 45 degrees, and it worked out pretty well. Okay, I spent a little time mitering the pieces for the base. So I get the two long sides and the short sides. I did already cut some biscuit slots in here. I'm just using the biscuit joiner like I did before, lining it up, and pretty straightforward. Once you've seen somebody use a biscuit joiner, you've pretty much seen it all. So what these biscuits going to do, they're going to help line everything up just like they did in the case. So I just put a number 20 biscuit in it, and then when I get ready to put it together, everything will go be all lined up like it's supposed to. I'm not going to do it. I'll show the dry fit here in a minute, but yeah, so it actually worked pretty well. I said it's different ways you could do it. You could do splines, you could do different things to reinforce the miter, but the biscuit joiner works fine. It's not a lamello, but it actually, for as much as I use it, it does everything that I need it to do. So, all right, let me dry fit this together, and we'll take a look at it and see how it come out. I used a couple of band clamps to dry fit the base together. Overall, it came out pretty good the way I wanted it. Those biscuits help it line everything up. I have a bit of more work to do on these things before I can glue this up. One, they need to be sanded, and two, I need to put decorative cutouts on the ends. So I made this little pattern thing here. So I'll once I get the everything sanded up, I'll mark that out and then cut it out on the bandsaw and clean it up. So right now this is ready to be sanded and cleaned up. I did have a little bit of an issue when making mitered things like this. Drive me absolutely nuts. The back piece is actually flush with the case, and then these stick out proud, so that when I'll put a molding on, and it'll be on top of this. So I wanted the inside of the case on this side would actually be like this, and then on this thing it would actually be on the back, it would be even with the back. It'll be a little bit clearer when I actually get it done. I did have a little bit of an issue with trying to cut this back piece because it's actually under the cabinet. It was a little bit different than the front piece. So as you can see, or maybe you can't, but what is it? No matter how many times I cut it, it's still too short. It came out a little short on that piece. Let's see. But it is about 3/4 of an inch short or whatever, I guess. But overall, I just had to make a new piece. But so now I got a piece of cherry that I can do something else with. But anyway, that was a little bit of a setback. But other than that, it came out pretty good. I've laid out the cutouts on the base. I just took my little pattern that I made, lined it up with the end, went around it with a pencil, did that on both ends because you have to flip it over when you get to the other end. And then to connect the two of them, I just set a combination square and run the line down between the two of them. So it's got a nice curve, gentle curve on it. So the pattern I just kind of made up with some using some French curves and come up what I thought was pleasing. And then I used a spindle sander and sanded it to shape and got everything nice and smooth. I'm going to use this on these things. I'm going to double stick tape it to here and then use a flesh trim bit to clean all that up. That's after I cut this out on the bandsaw. On the end piece, it's the same process except that it's short, of course. So I just did the two of them, and where they just overlap, a little bit overlap in the middle. We'll do the same thing with that. The back was a little bit different. Since you can't see it, it's generally going to be up against a bed or a wall or whatever. I just did a little cutout on this end, but I only went up to the first point of this first curve on both sides, and then used the combination square and drew a line to connect them. So we got those. Once we got them all laid out, I'm going to get the bandsaw and we're going to cut these things out, staying just outside the line so that we can trim them up with the router. The bandsaw makes it easy to cut out these decorative cutouts on the base pieces. Goes pretty quickly. Of course, you could also use a scroll saw or a jigsaw to do the same thing, but a bandsaw sure does come in handy. The bandsaw leaves some pretty rough cuts on the piece, so what I've done is I've used some double stick tape and taped the template to the piece, and just using a flush trim bit to clean it up. I used that on all the end pieces. Then for the longer section in the middle, I just taped a straight edge to it and cleaned up the middle piece using the router and the flush trim bit. Okay, let me get you caught up here. I've gone ahead and glued the base up. It came out pretty nice. I did put some glue blocks in the corners. I probably wouldn't have had to do that, but I didn't want any chance of this joint coming apart in case somebody's dragging the thing across the floor or whatever. Probably won't, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. After that, I went ahead and put some glued and screwed some blocks to the side. This is what's going to mount the base to the case. Across the back, I cut some biscuit joints to keep everything aligned. This will all be glued across the back because it's flush with the back of the case. Anyway, the next thing to do is to mount this thing. Oh, and I did dye the inside or stain the inside of the base, and then we'll go ahead and put some finish on it after. But I wanted it. I probably wouldn't have had to do that, but just in case somebody looks under it sometime, I want to make sure that everything is the finish nice. So I'll put a little finish on that. Probably not as much as I put on the outside, but enough to give it a little bit of color. The dye looks kind of dye stain mixture looks kind of washed out at this moment, but it'll look better once I put some finish on it. Okay, next thing to do is mount this thing to the case. Putting the base on the case was pretty straightforward, and I did put some glue on the little attachment blocks that I have there. They're going to be screwed, there'll be a screw in that as well, into pre-drilled holes. I pre-drilled the holes in the case and everything already. I put glue all across the back. The whole back is glued on and with a little glue in the biscuits. So it's just a matter of putting that glue on there, putting the biscuits in, and then driving the screws to attach this base to the case. I'm going to use some cove molding to at that joint between where the base and the case come together. I just have a cove bit in the router table. After making multiple passes, this is the final pass, but after making multiple passes and raising the bit, I come up with the cove profile that I wanted, and it actually worked out pretty well. Okay, I've gone over to the table saw and I've ripped the molding off the piece of wood that we're using. And I've already mitered one end of this piece, and I can get this one to come up here. We got a nice tight miter there. I got a little miter sled that I made a few years ago that cuts pretty good miters. So I'm just going to glue these things on. The grain of the base, the case, and this is all running in the same direction. So I think I'll just glue them on. They seem to be fitting pretty nice. I think if any give me any grief, I'll put a couple of pins in it or something just to hold it on there. I'm going to wait till I get it glued on to sand it. Needs to be sanded. I got a little few burn marks in the cherry from the router bit, which is kind of hard to avoid. If you stop it all or hesitate at all, it'll burn. So, but that's a nice fit there. So I'm happy with that. So I'm gonna miter the other end, and on this one the back is just cut flush with the back of the case, so there's no miter back there. So overall, it's fit pretty nice. So let's go ahead and get that glued on, then we can sand it up. All right, let's get caught up here. I got the cold molding on the bottom glued on. I didn't have to use any pins. I actually could put some spring clamps across there to hold it all on. I got a nice tight fit at the miters. It's cut flush at the back. I spent quite a bit of time sanding it, taking off any glue, squeeze out, getting it ready, and I put blotch control on all of it. So the next thing to do is the case part's pretty much done except for hinges. So next thing we're going to do is cut the top to size. It'll have a 1-inch overhang on the sides and in the front, and then we can fit the hinges and put a profile on the top, and we're close to being done with the woodworking anyway. Then we have to put some finish on it. So I'm happy with the way the molding came out. I think it looks good, dresses up that joint right there, and it looks pretty nice, I think. So let's move on to the top. After I ripped the top to width, I used the crosscut sled on the table saw to square up the ends. It's just a matter of trimming off one end and then measuring and cutting the piece to length. So it's pretty straightforward. Okay, I have these hinges that I got from Horton Brass. They're nice brass hinges. There's going to be 3 on this case. I've already done I already let in the mortises on the end, let the hinges in on the end. This line is centered on the case, and all I'm going to do is line up the center hole of the hinge about with the approximately center with the line. Let's see, we're going to take like an X-Acto knife and scribe a couple of lines here. There's one. Tricky part's doing the second one. So let's make a line here on this one. Okay. There's those. I like to take a pencil just so I can see, and pencil mark on it there so I can see them. Now what I'm going to do is take a piece of scrap, because the router base is, this is not wide enough for the router base without being tippy, so we'll put a piece of scrap on there with a couple of clamps that are out of the way. Make sure it's even with the back part of the case. Put a clamp over here. I'll take a block and even this up just to make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. Cover your ears. And of course that went too far down. Bring it back up. All right, there we go. trim router, I got a little dado cleanout bit that makes a nice flat bottom. So I'm just going to freehand this thing. I used the hinge. I put the hinge on the router to set the depth, so we got it where it needs to be. And so we're going to route this out. Okay. All right, we got a little extra there. We'll just do a little chisel work here and take care of that. I fit the chisel in that line I made with the X-Acto knife. Give it a little push before I whack it with a hammer. I'm going to speed this up here a little bit. I did spend quite a bit of time with the chisel cleaning up the rest of this little mortise for the hinge. It just was a little time-consuming process, but it came out pretty good in the end. All right, let's see how we did. Moment of truth. Put the hinge in there. Everything is nice and flat to the case, so we're good to go. It's going to be flush to the inside of the case when I get ready to screw them in, so there we go. All right, I finished letting the hinges into the lid. It was pretty much the same process. I marked them out, removed most of the waste with the router, and then squared it up with a chisel. I've attached them with some steel screws, the brass screws. The final screws are going to be brass, but there's high probability they wouldn't hold up to being taken in and out. Plus, I use a steel screw to cut the threads on the hole before I screw the brass ones in. Thing to remember on the lid was that the screws aren't longer than the thickness of the lid, which they were. Otherwise, you get a nice decorative feature on the top, which is 3 screws sticking out the top of the case, which would not be a good thing. So on these steel screws, I ground them down so that they didn't go all the way through. On the brass ones, I can just clip them off the same length to make sure that they don't do the same thing. So the test is how does it close? Actually, everything works pretty nice. So the next thing to do is do some sanding on the top and then finish the edges. The outside or the top edge is going to be a round over, and then this bottom's going to have a cove similar to the base molding, so they kind of match and it gives you a place to put your fingers to lift the lid up. So there we go. Looking pretty good. So after we do that, that'll be the last bit of woodworking on the project, and then we're off to finish. I just used a handheld router to do the profile on the lid. This is I have the cove bit that I use to make the moldings in the router. This is the first pass. It took me several passes to get to the profile that I was looking for. The key thing was just to take a little bit off at a time, and eventually you get there. Well, it's a busy day here in the shop/studio. I got the kiln doing a bis fire. It's firing to cone 04, which is 1945 degrees, and we're currently at 1105, so it's got a little bit ways to go. That's doing a nice job of heating up the garage, so that's one good thing about it. I also earlier today put some finish on or not finish, I stained the case of the hope chest. That'll have to dry till tomorrow, and then I'll start putting some finish on it. What I want to talk about now is what I do after I put the first couple coats of finish on. This is the lid, the underside of the lid, and I've put I brushed on 2 coats of this water-based high-performance top coat from General Finishes. I like that. It goes on quick, and it and it dries fast. So I put on 2 coats. That raised the grain, so I took some 320 and I cut it back with just a scuff sand, so it's nice and smooth now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to glaze this piece. Basically, it's just taking the same stain stain and dye mixture that I used and put on the piece and cover up any or even out any areas and give it a little bit of more depth. I got a couple of spots like over here on this edge. You can't see them, but it's got a light spot there that I don't like. So I can actually manipulate the stain and get it to cover the areas, and it just lays on top of the finish. And then when that's done, I'll let that dry, and then tomorrow I'm just gonna, I think I'll spray some, the kiln will be done, I can put that away, and we're gonna just spray on some other top coat, a couple of coats on this, already 2 coats, and that's gonna be good enough. So let me get set up and we'll go ahead and we'll get ready to glaze the underside of this lid. Well, like I said in the last segment, it's just a matter of, this glazing is just a matter of taking the dye stain mixture that I used and wiping it on with a staining sponge and getting the color to even out a little bit and getting everything looking nice and even, and then letting it dry and then spraying on some additional finish. Here I got the case up on a Lazy Susan, and I'm going to spray a couple of coats of top coat on it. I'm going to put these on with the spray gun. I'm using a Erlex 5500 spray station and HVLP sprayer. So I didn't get a lot of overspray. I did wear the proper protective equipment and covered up anything that I didn't want to get any finish on, which it didn't really go anywhere other than where I was pointing the spray gun. So it actually worked out pretty well. Okay, it's probably not going to show up real well in the garage here with this lighting, but I've finished the putting on the top coat. I sprayed on 3 fairly light coats after I glazed it. After the 3rd coat, I cut it back with some 320, and then for the last coat, I brushed it on with a foam brush. Overall, I'm very happy with the way that it came out. It's got a nice satin sheen on it. So next thing to do, let this dry for a day or so, and then I'll put the hinges on and the lid support, and then this piece will be finished. Okay, here's the piece all finished up, ready to be delivered. I got the hinges on with a lid support so that the lid stays where it's supposed to. Let me get you a little closer. We'll take a look at the inside. The inside has the cedar bottom on it, which looks real good with the rest of the finish. So overall, this was a really fun project. It was a lot of work, but in the end, it all paid off. So I'm very happy with it. So we're ready to make a delivery. All right, that's how I made Hannah's Hope Chest. I hope you enjoyed the videos. I thank Ellen for giving me the opportunity to work on a special project for her daughter. I thank you for watching this video, and I thank all my subscribers. So I don't post often, but when I feel like I have a project that's worthy of putting out on YouTube, I try and record it and put it out here the best I can. So thanks everybody for watching. I'll put some pictures up at the end here. If you got any comments, go ahead and leave them down below. All comments are welcome, so please go ahead and leave them, and I'll answer them as quickly as I can. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.